today, anyways.
I mean, it's early yet. Hard to tell.
Depends on how you define okay.
You sound like a philosopher.
So Aaron and Jen, I heard about the furloughs of Salem Kaiser's all teachers. So yeah.
I missed that. That come down yesterday?
Yeah, they furloughed all teachers in Salem Kaiser, kind of like what Portland's doing. And so they're reducing their time. I guess they're cutting back their contracts, and then so that they can apply for the COVID aid or whatever, which is like $600 a month. And then I heard Allison also heard, I guess, from the district that they'll be trimming back, like 0.3s, 0.2s, whatever it is, all the kind of part timers, and then possibly next semester or next year, no new hires anywhere.
Yeah, they've got a $48 million shortfall to find. And that either means they cut 24 days of school because it's $2 million a day to run the district, or they do this. This just reminds me back in 2008 when they just destroyed they just laid everybody off. They cut all specials, class sizes went up. It's really tough. And so, yeah, we have a lot of teachers that got hired in Salem Kaiser. And I'm curious what's going to happen. And they just hired another one of our, we had a student from 2017 who I just did her final reference check for, and she just got hired yesterday by Salem Kaiser.
Really? Wow. Yeah.
And so but she's a bilingual position, so she's going to be a little more protected than some of the others. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. It's a hot mess of budget woes. There's no way to find $48 million.
No. Yeah. Principal.
I got some buried in my backyard.
Now no. If you and here's what you need to say: if you help me dig up fence posts, you might find it, because that's how you get people to help build a fence.
There you go. I thought of that.
Yeah, Allison had a principal reach out to her, offering her a position at a middle school, and she was like, I don't think I'm going to move. I'm going to just stay put, because, you move and then all of a sudden you risk yourself, newest hire, first hire kind of thing. So she's like, nah, as much as I like the position, the way it's laid out, I think I'm just going to stay where I'm at. But
yeah.
No.
So are they? So is that furlough just like a partial, like a couple days a week? It's not full, is it?
No. Yeah, I think it's 1 day a week. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wild stuff.
Oh, man.
Yep, it's a mess.
Gosh. Got to get back to work. So. Well, sweet. I don't know if any of you had a chance to look. I got the first session's videos up, divided them up into our different sections, and so. But anyway, so it actually worked out pretty well, because I was able to. They each were like 10 minutes each. It was like 4 different 10-minute sections. So the second one went a little bit longer, but I think there are distinct topics on each of them that work pretty well. So yeah, I have the first one up, the second one almost done editing, should be able to get it all up too, and then we will do this one. So
cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kent.
Thanks for doing that, Kent.
And I did also get to hear you guys talk about me when I was in the bathroom, so that was good. Greg was very perceptive of, let's not let this thing get out of control, because he's.
So you watched the video while you were in the bathroom?
Well, not saying that's never happened before, but yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah, no, I didn't do that, but yeah. So on this one, so what I'm thinking is
don't mock me. This is backwards and it's driving me crazy.
Which way are we going? Yeah, just do Aaron's thing and
It's a
spike it up.
mirror. All right. Anyway, we can get serious now.
Wow, that's so good. Yes. So on this one, I don't have stuff prepared for the fourth one. We're talking about video stuff because I figured this would probably exhaust us. And so this is the talking about our strategy. So we've talked about what, like outcomes assessment. So we'll maybe recap that a little bit. So the questions, I just pulled this off of what Greg had gathered together. Engaging students. So that could just be a reminder, a short thing like this is our goal, is to engage students. What activities are easier for students to engage with remote learning? The third question I have, how do we design content and learning activities that spark student creativity and curiosity?
That sounds like my question. Is that for me?
This one?
Yeah, that sounds like something I would say.
It's pretty brilliant, so it must be.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I wouldn't go that far. It sounds a little philosophical again. I'll put that right in the define okay category.
Yeah. We go back to the Meno from Plato. Is virtue teachable? And then we could spend an hour on that, maybe. So, oh, and I think this is the last one I have. Small group activities, synchronous discussions online. There are actually a couple others, but this might be enough, right? Because these are the other ones. Yeah. Yeah.
With the one just before that about the forums, or how do we want to divide that between this and session 4? Because I thought session 4 was about videocast, podcast, and then Sam, did you want to talk about VoiceThread?
Yeah, some of that could be done.
Yeah,
there.
that's a good idea.
And then some of it could be dear because, like, your next question that you had up after the one that's currently showing, is that the small, group activities kits, tools like VoiceThread facilitate small group activities. But you can do it you can do it in other ways as well. But
Yeah.
So the way, actually, go ahead, Jen. What were you gonna say?
No, I was just going to say, like, I have a really good thing I like to use here with Padlet, if you've ever used Padlet before. And you can do Padlet in groups. Like, they can actually work simultaneously on the same project together, and you can be invited into all of those places. So, like, I can talk about a little bit of stuff like that isn't video based. It's all, it's creative. It's super engaging for students. They actually do amazing, amazing work on Padlet when we go through it and once they learn it, and it's really easy. But anyway, so that's kind of one thing I wanted to talk about in here because it's easy for people to learn and it's easy to just get people running.
And we already have a rubric designed for a Padlet.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah, my brain goes to this. If in this session we talk again, we're beginning to move from theoretical to practical because that's really what everybody wants. They want the practical. But in this conversation, session 3, we probably should stay more theoretical still, and talk about you can still do small groups. You can still do forum posts and how you do forum posts, and then save details to session 4. And then in session 4, we break it down. Okay, let's talk about making videos. Let's talk about VoiceThread. Let's talk about Padlet. Let's talk about forums and small groups. And we are really specific to define the tools in each of those areas. Does that, I see some nodding heads. Does that like organizationally make sense?
Yeah, that actually
I like.
Yeah, that works well too then, because we can link some very specific resources to session 4 that don't get lost in the shuffle of everything else. So that would work actually really well. Once again, it's why I work with you, Aaron, your logical brain.
I like the distinction of you leaving session 4 to focus on the tools and this session to be about activities and strategies. So that makes sense to me.
So when I look at like the questions again, so here you have a question about small group activities and facilitating. Basically what we're saying here is not how to do it yet, but it's still important to do it. We're not just delivering asynchronous in whole group, but let's be creative, and we can increase student engagement by doing small groups and things. And we don't really need to say much more. Is that in next session, we'll talk about how to do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, that could make today's session pretty short then.
Possibly.
So let me run through these again really quick. So this is just the title, like the lower third of what we're talking about. Is that something we want to use? Review engagement, or does that need to be a separate slide?
I think it's an important place to start. When
Okay.
we talk about less is more, and the point of all any type of learning again is how can you get your students plugged in?
Yeah. And then so the next one I have.
If we're not getting into specifics, then we would go through that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this question could be just the bigger picture of, what kinds of activities.
So here, I think, like Sam, you referenced in the previous video, like bringing in guest speakers. We talk about, videos of ourselves, videos of our students, videos of experts. We talk about forums, like a thinking. So this is where maybe we lay out when we talk about activities. These strategies or plans are what works best for asynchronous remote learning, so that allow for students to engage. And so I guess here's where we just run down our favorites without necessarily getting into the specifics. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
And then how do we design content? And I really like this question because it is that creativity and curiosity that will drive this. So we decided this would be a good one to use still too.
Well, I think that's going to come in the previous on the what activities are easiest to engage in. Like we will cover this as one of those things. So I don't think you need that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That one seems a little.
Okay. And
so actually, I see you writing down. I want to make an outline too, so I remember what's coming in, when to say what, where.
I know.
Yeah, you might give us those real quick again, Kent, just so we don't jump ahead.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with this slide. That's just the title of what we're doing. Review, engagement, so that and then secondly, we will, and so the second questions, lower third, activities, they're easy.
And that's where I think you can bring in the small group kind of thing. You can take that other question that you had and put that into here.
Yeah.
Is it easy for you to change the wording on down here? Because easy and like when I read that question, I would say we would want it to say like what activities are best to create student engagement?
Yeah. The word,
or something
isn't easy for everybody. It's just, could throw people off. Is it best? Okay, never mind. Thinking out loud.
No, think out loud, Jen. Come on.
Well, no. I was going to argue your word best though. because are they best or are they
Sure.
you know what I'm saying? Like if I say
Effective.
someone will go, that's not easy for me. What are you talking about? And we lose the engagement of the person watching this. If we say these are the best, or is there just a word that says these help facilitate, or these help encourage, or these help? I don't want to make absolutes, because these aren't, we're not offering enough absolutes. We're offering some just beginner resources.
What if we just say,
I
how do
like
we
Jen-
help students?
What activities?
What activities help engage students?
Yeah.
What are some
something-
activities that help engage students?
Yeah, okay. And
What
then do a
activities
couple
are effective to create
Yeah.
student engagement or something along those lines?
Yeah.
Kent, the camera's loving your shirt.
It's like, oh yeah, it's too many. Yeah, I didn't realize it was going to do that. It's all sparkly. Yeah.
Vibrant. It's just.
It's what kind of activities are effective? Two is the wrong word, isn't it? In.
Just put effectively engaged.
What strategies effectively engage students in remote learning?
That's good. Yeah, take it from passive.
Sam, are you in your office or did you get kicked to a different part of your house?
No, I mean, yeah, I came in. I'm in my office.
What kind of activities effectively engage students?
I like it.
Yep.
Cool. So that would be the third. What? No, let's. Yeah. So that'd be the second main question. Oh, yeah. We just reworded this one, right?
I just have two questions so far.
Okay.
Yeah, I have the review and the activities question.
Yeah.
What kind of activities?
Yeah.
This covers that. Yeah. So we don't really need to do that one.
I don't know. Aaron seemed intrigued by it.
No, I think, were we merging that with that last one that we did? Like,
We can. It fits.
It does.
It almost is the link between the first and the second question, right? When you review learning theory and stuff, you talk about creativity and curiosity. So I think by doing 1 and 2, we will get what we would end up repeating ourselves if we came back to this one.
yeah. Well, it is kind of like, this is just describing the kinds of activities, and this is like, how do we actually go about? I guess we can play it by ear to see if we need more content, we can kick into this. So we'll kind of play that by ear a little bit. We didn't need to decided not to do small groups, right? No.
Right.
We'll get to yeah. I do think the talking about weeks, topics, units is important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the small group stuff, that's in the second question.
Yeah. Okay. And then topics. And then I think we had this one at the end.
Yeah, delete that one because we covered that in the previous session.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
The week's topics units in Populi, it's really designed, at least the way I understand it, to do like weekly lessons. Do you know what I mean? So is that a conversation?
Well, it is from this viewpoint. So yes, they've set it up in a weekly type of format, but it's still loosely constructed where you don't have to do that.
Okay.
I
So
think I'm going to change my shirt. This is really distracting. Yes. Give me 2 seconds. And I'm going to keep it running so you can't talk about me.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
I thought he was going for the wing.
So can you change Populi's format of week by week?
Well, no. So what they do is you get basically the blank slate, and even though you have a calendar as such that you're using, the key will be in structuring your syllabus to really do what you want to do. So, for example, I teach in a grad level online course, and I do units. I give them 10 days for each unit because it just doesn't work otherwise. It's just too quick. It's just too, and so it's too much. So I break it into units, but the syllabus will be the key, and then communicating each unit as it's opened up. So I have a video for each one of those units. And so I work through a unit model on that, whereas other classes, week by week is fine. But there's certain cases, depending upon what you're dealing with, where a topics might be a better approach or a units kind of breakdown.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and that's generally the class we co-teach. Yeah, we use topics a lot in our classes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I prefer a topics or modules based because you can segregate your content a little bit more. But I didn't feel like Populi was going to allow me to do that. But it makes sense. Then I let the syllabus do that work, and I just plug things into Populi as needed.
That's right.
In Populi, can you, like, if you open a lesson or create it, can you set the date range for that? Or you can title it. So I can use the lesson feature and make bigger chunks than just weekly.
Yeah, the assignment feature and the lesson. I think the assignment may not give you a date range on assignments. I can't remember. It may just have like when it's due.
Okay.
And then the lesson capabilities does allow you to change, like a beginning and an end for the lesson.
And lessons, you can, like, you take your basically you create your assignments in the assignments, but then you pull them into the lessons so that students find them all bunched together. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So I could actually not use lessons at all if I just have all the files and resources where it says files and resources, and I have all my assignments and say, go figure it out yourself. They don't even need to have a lesson. Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's the way that it's structured, and you can set it up that way. So yeah. Because I mean, a lot of faculty they get frustrated because, especially in online, my students are not turning things in on time. Well, it's because you're using too much. Your weeks it's too truncated, and you need to allow some more space. Especially like I used the illustration in the previous one about, I had a student in China. Well, she doesn't even see the assignment. Maybe a day later than everybody else, and then she's got to work on it. And then by the time she gets back and she's interacting through threaded discussions with everybody, it's too late by then. So you have to space it.
So she sees it later, but then her due date is 24 hours ahead of everybody else here because she's on that side of the daylight. So she gets the double whammy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
You gotta think. So yeah.
Okay.
All right. So you guys ready to just dive in, see what happens?
Sure.
What could possibly go wrong? Yes.
Editing magic.
I like your shirt, Ken.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah. It's less. Yeah.
Less is more.
I'll be able to focus on other people now.
I know. Now you guys can all look. Yeah. So. Yeah, it's weird how those designs sometimes really do weird things to the camera and optics or something. So, all right.
Next time I think I'll wear a shirt that is a green screen.
Have you seen that before? Like in the bloopers thing where the news people have like a green tie and yeah. All right.
I'll wear a green screen shirt and then put Terry Cruz's body over it.
Oh man, yeah. All right, we'll do it like one of those cut things or whatever. So, all right. So this is going to be all right. Let me get the right thing on. Here we go. So we are going to enter into session 3 of the topics that we're looking at. We looked first of all at a general idea of where we are going with education in general, but also some specific ideas with with online specifically. And then we talked about something called backward design. And before we go further, I had a question. Is it backward design or backwards design? Is there an S at the end of the backward? That's a really important question.
I think it's just backward.
Okay.
No S.
Well, you're from Texas, so you're.
I think your thinking is backwards, Ken.
Yeah. Well, it's those little things. Like, there's an S? Is there not an S? Like, so, okay. And I'm going to see if I got this right here. So, as we're thinking about this, is this the right way to think about it? Where we have like our outcomes. This is what we're starting with, where we want the students to be. Then we figure out if there, how we would assess that, whether how we're going to figure out whether that outcome actually happened or not. And then based on the kind of assessment that we are going to be engaging in, then we go ahead and plan the activities. Is that generally the way that we were thinking?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
I would say the bottom one of activities, I would say it would be content and activities. So what do students need to know and do? So it goes together, and that is, the bulk of the daily part of your teaching.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So my role, what they're going to do. Yeah. So that's sort of where this session is going to be headed, where we're actually thinking of what do you do when the class is happening? Like, okay, Monday morning, I have a class. Well, do I talk to them? Do I have them do a worksheet, show them a video? Like, what do we do with this? So as we think about this, we're going to just jump in. We have a few questions to walk through. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump in with this first question. And I guess it's maybe more of a summary than a specific question. But we had talked previously about student engagement and how that is probably the most important thing that we do. Because if a student is not engaged, we, what's the point, right? And then some of this has to do with attention span, things like that. And then less is more. And I think both Aaron and Sam used that phrase, less is more. Sam, why is this an important kind of motto to keep in front of us as we design things?
Well, a large part of it is because, especially if we're talking about strictly online learning environments, the students, it's predominantly an asynchronous. It's not that it goes against synchronous kinds of engagements with students, but it's more predicated towards or leans towards asynchronous activity and engagement. And so even though we have content, we have to think through the content and the sizable amount of that, and then disseminating information and the content, delivering systems, those kinds of things to the student. It could be quite overwhelming simply because they just do not have the time to engage. So less is more in the sense of that you create, like Aaron made this comment earlier, that it's about quality, not quantity. And so that's really a key for students in using the less is more principle that we just think, well, we're the experts. We have all the information. We want to deliver all this information and this content to the students. And it, quite frankly, just becomes too overwhelming, especially in an online environment. So less is more is kind of the strategy, the way to think about that. So it's really about the quality more than the quantity.
Yeah.
And when we go back to thinking about our outcomes, we're not just wanting to accomplish cognitive outcomes, but we're also want to accomplish affective ones. So we want students to value the subject. And if we just overwhelm them with content, they're not going to have the time to process, to receive what we're talking about, and to get to where they love the subject.
Yeah, I would say like when you dump truck someone where you just pile on all of this reading and all of these little assignments, they essentially end up teaching themselves because they might not have as much engagement with the instructor as they're working through all of this. And then it begins to feel like busy work. And when you get to the point where a student feels like what you're assigning is just simply busy work or something that goes through the motions, you absolutely lose all engagement for the content, for the course, for the interaction. There's no richness to that feel of it's one more paper, one more assignment, but what am I getting out of it? If I'm not getting to talk with my peers, if I'm not getting to interact with this massive amount of content, what am I getting out of it? And if I can't find what I'm getting out of it, it's worthless to me. So it is the idea that if we just throw them a giant list of expectations to read and do on their own, even if we do have the occasional video or we interact in a forum, we're still setting them up for disengagement through becoming self-teachers. And that's not what we want for our students.
That's a great point, Jen, in this respect, that you use the word the dump truck. And I use this in not only with our students who are in teaching the Bible kinds of courses, but also using our Africa training partnership. One of the favorite concepts of our pastors in Africa is the idea of the information dump truck. And so they do the beep, 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 then we dump a bunch of content on them. And we do that in face-to-face classes as well. So we have to be cognizant of that kind of information dump, not only in face-to-face kinds of settings, but certainly online. It becomes even more overwhelming. So it's a principle to keep in mind, whether we're in face-to-face, hybrid, or online learning systems.
And just going back and remembering that while we may feel very secure and very knowledgeable about the content we're putting out to them, they don't. And so while we think, hey, this is easy, this isn't going to take them very long, because it wouldn't take me very long. But I've been doing this, this is my specialty, so to speak. So remembering that what we're putting out to them has to be put in the perspective of a brand new learner, not our own understanding of how to attack that content. I think sometimes we forget that it's not as easy for our learners as it is for us, because we are so comfortable in what we teach and what we know.
Isn't that the curse of information? They talk about that when you know a bunch of stuff, like I recently was watching some YouTube videos on photography stuff, and trying to, get how to do this setting or whatever. And the guy's like, well, of course, everyone knows that the f-stop, blah, blah, blah. And then he just kind of moves on. Like, that's why I'm watching your video. I'm trying to figure this out, but he knows it and his buddies know it and everyone he works with knows it. So you should know it too. So yeah, getting back into that mindset of where they are, that's tricky. Yeah.
And that's the distance learning. When we're face to face, we see it on their faces and we sense the energy in the room. And when we're doing it online, we have to just be super cognizant of that, because we won't have those nonverbals to guide us when we've hit the overload on them. So.
Yeah.
I think a guiding principle when you talk about engagement is going back to our learning theory. You boil down that priority of what do you want students to do? And Jen mentioned busy work and the dump truck. We always talk in our education classes. I say, remember a class when you were in high school when you thought the teacher gave you a lot of busy work. How excited were you about that? And we make our future teachers think in those lines of, remember when you're a student, don't do that to your own students. And so when you think about what you want your students to do, it has to be real, it has to be relevant, and it has to be meaningful, and they have to be doing something. Learning requires action. And so back to where Sam started, less is more. If I can have fewer quality engaging activities, students are going to get more about that. If you think of yourself as a learner, and Jen, you're in classes right now, it's that same concept. I can do these few things really well, and I'm going to demonstrate my learning. But those, even at the grad level, those classes that you're in, that you're getting nickel and dimed and you're doing a bunch of stuff, by the end of it, you're like, I don't care. I'm jumping through hoops. I'm just trying to check something off the list, and I'm not engaging. And so I think that helps us think about what we want our students to do. If we can keep in mind, it needs to be real, it needs to be relevant, it needs to be meaningful, and it needs to be quality.
Yeah.
Ken, I'd like to pick up on what David said.
Yeah, cool.
with the relevancy, because I think the bridge is starting with something that the students can build on, something that they already know, a skill they already can do, and then building the bridge from there to something that they value and they recognize is important for their lives or for our world today. I think that's where the relevancy comes in.
Yeah. And do they have to understand the relevance right away? I'm thinking like Karate Kid, right? Where he's wax on, wax off, and he's doing something and he's perfecting it, but he doesn't know how it all fits together. Do we do things? I mean, is that going to be part of our teaching where there are certain things that some basics that they have to understand, but they're not really going to get it until we've connected a few more dots?
I love that analogy. And I see Jen smiling and nodding her head, because we do that in our education classes all the time. She used the term a couple sessions ago of scaffolding, and we kind of defined how you build in supports to do something, and then maybe you switch gears and it's a different unit or a different topic, and you build in some supports and you slowly take it away. And the best feeling in the world as a teacher is when you get to the end of the semester, right, and the student goes, "Oh, yeah. I see how it all fits together," or "I can do this." And back what we were doing in September when you taught us this one little thing, and now I see why it's relevant. And it's that aha moment where it all comes together. And isn't that what teaching's all about? So I think that analogy is right on target.
Yeah.
And I do think it's okay to sometimes build the connections for them. We want to give them a big picture. This is where we're headed. Our outcome is this at the end of the term. And as we build those little skills that we know how they're all going to fit together, it's okay to say, hey, when we did this, this is how it connects to this. We can't always expect them to do all of that. And if we can build some of those connections for them, they begin to stay engaged and go, oh, okay, I really am making progress towards this outcome we've laid out. So I think sometimes we feel like we can't tell them where they're headed, or we can't show them the obvious, because it's, again, obvious to us, not to them. We already know how it's all going to fit together. So being really explicit in our connections and making sure they know we know the journey we're on, we know the path we're taking, really gives confidence in the hard pieces of content that they begin to work through.
Yeah. Brene Brown in one of her books talks about where she went to Pixar studios, and they were talking about when they make movies, and they're brilliant at telling stories. And they're saying the hardest part of doing a movie for Pixar is that middle part. There's like scene 2, I think, or the second act or whatever, because it's actually the longest and it's necessary for the narrative to move forward. But it's easy to get bogged down, easy to lose sight of where you're going. And they say they spend like 90% of the time just that middle part, trying to figure out how to do that. And that's kind of what we have to do too, is kind of keep that story going. So we'll kind of just move this one with this previous question. And so now we know it's important to do this, that we need to engage students. So generally, what kind of activities would do this? And we don't have to be too specific, because in the next section, we'll give some of those specifics. But when we're thinking of the types of things to do, and partially, I think maybe what's happening with us is that we have only a few tools in our toolbox, right? Like I've got a hammer and a screwdriver, and if that's all you have, that's all you use, right? But what kind of tools are out there that we could put in our toolbox that are really effective at engaging students?
Well, I think one of the things that I would mention is a previous comment that we mentioned before, and it goes along with the less is more, is the idea that the worst teaching method that you use is the one that you use all the time. And so variety is the spice of teaching life. In one of my classes that's designed more towards educational kind of theory for ministry implications, I hand out a handout called 109 plus teaching methods. And the plus is intentionally put into that handout to encourage students to think that you're only limited by your own effectiveness as a teacher in coming up with different kinds of engaging activities, whatever they may be. And so it's not that it's just limited to 109, but you beg, borrow, you don't steal, but or I guess you must steal.
Van Gogh said all art is stealing. Yeah.
I mean, but you beg and you borrow. And so, like a common thing that'll happen here on the third floor is we'll joke amongst ourselves. Well, what would Ryan Stark do? Well, he would put a picture on his handout. Well, what would Tim Anderson do? Well, he'd show a video. Well, what would Sam Baker do? He'll put them into small groups, or what would, and so on and on. But, so you're always thinking about how can I make this better and more engaging for students? So again, variety is the spice of teaching life. And so, yeah, in a broader general sort of sense, for speaking to that without speaking to specific activities.
Mhm.
Kent,
Yeah.
you use the analogy of tools. So you have a hammer and a screwdriver. One of the things you can do is you can go to Lowe's and you can buy a saw. So we look for other tools. So I'm going to see if this works on the screen. I use things like
good.
this.
Yeah.
You get it like there it is.
Yeah.
Is that made out of dead trees?
There's lots
Is that-
of books for college faculty. There we go. Smile for the camera. There it is.
Wow. Now we have to pay
And
them a
the-
royalty.
It's kind of like walking up and down the aisles of Lowe's and saying, "Oh, that's a tool I could use." So then, and the nice thing about these Josie Bass publications, they always have a paragraph about using them online. So
Have
it's
you-
about the face, and then you can turn around and say, "Well, how can I put this online?"
Have you used a number of those?
I
and
have.
How
I use
has that gone?
I find a lot of great ideas.
Mhm.
I
Good,
think there's always more to learn. And we've got to be creative so we've got to do some investigation on our own. Sometimes I'll talk to students and I'll ask them, what would you do? How would you approach this content? In education, that's part of what we want them to do, is we want them to think about how to approach content. So it works for our particular purposes. And it's really interesting to see what they do and what they come up with, and having, even having them do like broader ideas of analyzing the strategies we do use. Was this effective? And so doing those kinds of conversations where we don't become, again, just that all-knowing expert, but we engage them in ways to approach content that are different. Students can be really creative, and they can actually get really excited about figuring things out with you. So aside, there's a lot of different strategies to go with that, but I pick their brain.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a little bit technical here, but there's effective strategies in face-to-face, and those effective strategies work in a remote learning as well. And so some of the basic building blocks you have for strategies, like putting them into groups or working with a partner or having them read and respond, just like you would ask a question out loud in class, you do the same components in remote learning. It just is using different tools. So the end goal is still the end goal. And I might have the same strategy, but the tool I use to implement that strategy is going to be a little bit different. In teaching and learning, there's a rhythm that happens. And so as we think about effectively engaging students, there has to be some content or skill at the beginning where you establish a foundation of learning for the students. Maybe it's direct instruction, maybe it's information, it's content that's given to them, and then they do something with it. And they're engaged, whether that's a discussion, whether that's doing an assignment, whether that's just answering a question, whether it's making their own video, own summary, whatever you're having them do. And then you come back to the next thing and you present more content and dig a little deeper or go a different direction. And so there's this consistent rhythm through the whole semester of jumping from, it's almost like playing connect the dots, but going in a circle. You plan to do something, you teach it, they do something with it, you give an assessment, you evaluate how that went, and then that informs what you plan to do next. And so you keep cycling around as you're continually engaging students. What you don't want, back to what Sam said, is to do all of your dump truck of information first. We're going to give you all the content you need for 10 weeks in a row, and now you have 5 weeks to figure out what to do with it. We're going to keep going back and forth through that because, again, that's what keeps students engaged. That piques their curiosity, that piques their creativity. They want to know what's next and how they're going to use what they're learning to do whatever they're going to do. And I think it really is effective for keeping kids plugged in.
So, Aaron, I have a question. Do you think that one way we can keep that rhythm going, like how we can sort of mimic that rhythm of face-to-face that we have online is by deciding purposefully and critically how we want to put content out, number one. So I'm going to put something out on Monday for my class, but I can't just put on Monday. I can't put everything on Monday for the whole week. I need to put something out on Monday, see how they respond as we come back. And I might then add a piece on Wednesday because I want to keep something fresh and something expectant coming. Like I want them to look for the next thing. And if I give them everything on Monday and they read it all on Monday, there's nothing new for a whole week. You know, they've got it out. So I'm wondering if that's one way in which we can mimic that rhythm of face-to-face is by us purposely being more connected by coming in multiple times during that week to add a little bit more, be engaged in this conversation or something like that.
Yeah, and I think, Sam, you probably can jump in with an idea here too. The challenge is the asynchronous, right, of the time that students have in remote learning. And so what you might have to do is spread out how you're doing. You know, if you post something on Monday and then expect students to watch the next thing on Wednesday in a remote learning, that might be unrealistic. But going back to less is more and attention span, I think shorter chunks of information and content delivery, again, at the initial phases of learning where it's more teacher-centric or expert-centric, having it short, concise, targeted, so that then they can interact and do something with it. And then you come back and more. We do this in our classes where it's a 50-minute face-to-face. I don't direct instruct for 45 minutes and then ask questions at the end.
Right.
I go for 10, 15 minutes and then I do a turn and talk, or I do a talk, hey, let me get some feedback of how you're downloading this. And then I'm ready to move on or not. And I think we have to do that same type of thing in a remote learning. The time frame might look different and it gets extended out. But we have to do that to promote student learning. Sam, I guess in your classes, I know you have longer blocks. You talked about that already, where it's like a 10-week instead of a week, a 10-day week. How does that work for you?
Yeah, so in that, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I think in one of our questions when we get to weeks, units, or topics and how we handle that. But yeah, I mean, when you're thinking about it, again, it's the quality of the engagement or the activity that you're doing with the students. So, I'll give you an example. Most recently, I heard that, and I'm not meaning to like diss anybody on our faculty room, but I heard that some courses were still expected to show up Monday, Wednesday, Friday at their assigned times. And you can get students to do that. They will do that because you've asked them to do that. But is that really getting at all the objectives, the outcomes, the assessing kinds of things that we're looking for maximizing our engagement with students? Just assuming that we expect them to do something, they will do it because we've asked them to do it, but it may not necessarily achieve the goals that we want. So when we're thinking about the design, especially of our activities to engage students, we have to think about time parameters in there as well. Are we giving sufficient time for them to read the material, to reflect on the material, to engage with others in discussion on the material, and then have some sort of summative sort of evaluation of that or whatever? Well, that takes time. And so a week may not necessarily get it done. So I have courses that I break up into 10-day units rather than a 5-day, typical work week. And students have, got back and thank you so much. Now, it's not that, hey, I'm letting you off the hook by providing less, but they're more engaged, and the quality of engagement, it goes off the charts as far as the way in which they're actually participating in the class. So yeah, it just kind of depends.
How often do you think, Sam, that you are in that class in that 10-day period where even if you're just checking in to look at progress or you're making a comment like, hey, I really like how the forum's going, keep up the good discussion, like you don't have to get real teachy on it, but how often do you think you're in there in that 10 days?
Well, and again, it depends on the class and the nature of the class. So some classes I may do a daily check-in just because of the online nature of it and the kind of engagement that I'm asking from them. Other kinds of courses that I teach, like our supervised leadership experience, these people are the hard work is them out in the field doing the field work, meeting with their mentors and their supervisors and those kinds of things. So I don't have to check in as frequently with them. Because they have other engagement points. So it really depends on the type of class and the structure of the class as to how much you're actually engaging as the faculty member with that. So it could be every day, or it may be once a week, typically, whatever it may be. But the point is making sure that you're connected.
Yeah.
You have some, it's not only students who go off the grid and are MIA.
Yeah.
But faculty have done that too. So, and it's
amazing how fast. It's kind of like dog years, that go. It's a different sort of time frame. It's kind of like online weeks seem to be greatly accelerated. And Jen, you probably, as an online student, it's like I've taken online classes before, and you just never catch your breath because you're just constantly going. And after I took an online class, I now sort of build in every 3 weeks. Like some intentional, just kind of downtime a little bit. Let's catch up. Let's catch our breath a little bit, and then we'll push forward. But it feels like you're in a sprint / marathon sometimes. And
I know that weekends are the most important time for an online student in a lot of ways, because they're trying to gather all these things during the week and be engaged in things and getting pieces done as they can. But having weekends for due dates is huge. So if something is due on Monday or Sunday night at 11 p.m. versus, Thursday or Friday is really helpful. If we're asking students to digest a lot and do a lot of processing on their own time as well, kind of giving them that space. And so that with that question, I was just really getting back to, we need to be cognizant of our own pacing in the online world of our pacing of engagement actually helps our course move and stay feeling current and relevant along the way, I think.
Yeah. And don't get ahead of them. Because it is easy for them to feel just, like, oh, I'm just so far behind now. I'm just done. And then they'll just jump off ship. And so that rhythm is really tough because you want them to have a quality experience, but you also want them to survive and have a life. And so here's another question.
About the craft of teaching.
Yeah.
I was just going to say what Jen said, described is really about the craft of teaching, the ability, whether you're online or face-to-face, to read your students, how well they're engaged, are they keeping up, and to be able to, as a teacher, to adjust to make sure that you're together.
One thing I would like to add that's overarching about the concept of activities is taking the student's perspective into account, increases engagement. So the 3 C's, if you give some students some choice, if they have an opportunity it could be topic, it could be medium, it could be how are they going to demonstrate what they've learned. If you can include student choice, engagement's going to go up. If you can spark student curiosity, and again, that goes to real relevance and meaning. Is there an application of what they're being asked to do or how they're being asked to engage that's relevant to their current situation or their future career or something along those lines? And then creativity. And I suppose that goes with a little bit with choice, but if they have creative license and they can design something that they can put their own thumbprint on it, those 3 aspects of an activity that you're going to assign a student to do are going to increase not only the quality of their product, but their engagement because they're interested in it. And so whatever it is, the activity, and it doesn't work for everything because sometimes you need it to be in this template or, this is the task. And so I'm going to do it. But finding those ways throughout the semester that when students are doing a product, when they are doing an assignment, when they are engaging in the learning, that they have some choice. They can explore their curiosity and they get to use their creativity to do that. I think you're going to see a higher interest in the students for doing what you have them do.
So if you are would you say that like almost every class, I sort of used this before, rubrics, and I think came to the conclusion, yeah, every class can use these. Do you think it's possible for every class to have choice, curiosity, creativity? I mean, if we're doing biology, we're learning about meiosis and mitosis. I mean, either know that or you don't. Do you think every class is able to have those?
Yes.
Okay. Next question.
I've been talking a lot here, but it'll even take like a math or a science class where it's more like you're looking for a right answer. You need to have 17 square root 45, whatever as the answer. But even how you explain that answer, the medium that I can do it, I'm going to make a video that shows me working through the project. That allows students to have some creativity. That's choice and creativity. Even if you're really narrow in what the content that you're expecting students to demonstrate, there are ways to allow for choice and creativity. It doesn't fit. I see where your question is going. It doesn't fit with every assignment. So there's some times where I just need to practice doing these math problems and I don't have any choice. If I have choice in my answers, then I'm going to get them wrong because I choose the answer to be 3. Nope, not it.
Postmodern. Yeah.
Right. So there's time and place, but even as you said with rubrics, a lot of times I'll have a creative trait on the rubric. And we'll get into that maybe more in session 4 when we talk about some of the ways that students can submit projects or do things, and where that might be appropriate to say, I'm gonna evaluate your creativity on this assignment. Some of you, I feel like I've been talking a lot. Like some of you others jump in here.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. It's choice, and whether that choice is big. For instance, I can give my students a choice project where I tell them within this large content area, they can study anything within this area on their own for the term, and then they can choose how they present what they've learned. That's a big choice project. It's ambiguous by nature. It's supposed to be really about them creating some learning for themselves. But on the other hand, I can say, here's a very defined piece of content. I want you to tell me what you've learned about, but I will give you a choice in how you show me what you've learned. So I give them the firm definition and they get to choose how the product comes out, or I give them the broad and say, surprise me, because really you've got to learn how to be a learner. College students end up getting so used to having the syllabus so delineated for them, they don't really have to think outside the box. So to push the box open and say, go figure this out and start to grow that independent learner in you. I'm constantly amazed what students will come up with and the heart and energy they'll put into choice. Mm-hmm. So I think choice is just absolutely huge if we want to pull students into our content on some level.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, Jen, that I found that when I give students choice, one, they're often perplexed by it or struck. They're like, wait, my whole academic career has been somebody's assigned something, I follow through with it, and I do it. I'm obligated to completing that task. But then when you give them choice, they're kind of thrown for it a little bit. But then it allows them the flexibility to engage with that choice in a way that brings about like the creative aspects that we want them to do. And I found that with students, by offering choice to them, it's so freeing for them in many respects. And part of that comes with brainstorming as well. So I think a large part of that is brainstorming, not only with us, the faculty member, but certainly amongst their peers as well. Because I get stuck in ruts as well. And so that's where I sometimes look to my colleagues for brainstorming ideas, or go to resources like Greg showed earlier, whether they're in textbooks or even online. And so finding those kinds of outlets where I can actually be more creative in the choices that I'm producing. And I think exempling that to students as well is a part of the learning curve for them, so that I'm showing them that they have a choice here, and I'm going to allow you these options. And so it's a big piece of it. But I like the aspects of brainstorming or creative dialogue with other people that can bring into that choice making, and then let them make the ultimate decision. It's a scary proposition for some of them. They think, man, I'm going to fail if I don't get this right. But, and I often tell them, like, well, if you do fail, at least you'll learn either A, you won't do that again, or B, maybe you need to just adjust some things so the next time it actually does work. But it's still an important part of learning.
And the important thing about if you're going to give a big choice project, or even if you say to them they have choice in how they present their learning, you have to give them the defined assessment criteria. So you have to have that rubric already there. If they can follow what the rubric's asking of, your choice project should have this many examples in it, or it should be tied to your professional learning. They need to have some boundaries in that to guide how they put a presentation together. But if you free them up with a little bit of that and have a rubric available to them, it's really, really exciting to see what our students will do.
Is it good also to have examples, Jen? Like, here's, from a previous class, here's a good example that a student did, just to give them an idea. It's like, oh, I could do something like that. I'm not going to copy that, but
I don't like to give examples when I want them to be really creative, because it suddenly limits their thinking.
Yeah.
That the teacher showed us this as, even if I said this is a medium, like this is just a regular old B, right? This isn't the exemplar of the world. Suddenly that becomes the exemplar, and I get 15 of the same thing. So I give them very clear expectations through the rubric. I give them freedom. And then what I say to them is I give them deadlines, like, by this date, I want you to tell me what your topic is. So I help them start to build some structure without telling them what to do. I want your topic by this date. And what I would have is they'd come tell me a topic and I go, that sounds perfect, go for it. Now they have permission to be creative. Or I'd say, I think you're going down the wrong road. How about you think about it this way? Here's something to go read and give you some ideas. And you help them find structure without giving them that structure, because the minute you show them an example, you've limited their thought processes on how to approach the topic or how to approach their project.
If you're
my estimate is my
if
personal.
you're going to show an example, you need to show like 8.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These two people made video. This person wrote a poem. This person made a PowerPoint presentation. This person, so you're actually showing them kind of the choice in how they could communicate the medium, but you have 8 of them, not just one, because if you show 1 or 2, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, that's all you'll get.
Yeah. So curiosity, how do we, because curiosity is the key, right? I mean, if we can find a way to kindle curiosity, it's like a self-driving car, right? I mean, it's like a pendulum that just keeps going forever and ever, right? Because if they're curious about something, they are going to have a built-in motivation to learn. Is there a way to spark that in our students?
Choice. You give them option. You give them the ability to pursue what they're interested in. I mean, that's what choice is it's to engage the curiosity. It's not to achieve my content goals. It's to engage curiosity as a learner, I think. I had my students get on Twitter. They were required to be on Twitter for class, and they had to read stuff on education, what was happening in education around the country. They had to find things that were sparking curiosity. And it was fun to watch them get engaged in conversations around things that we weren't teaching in class, but were relevant to their professional goals. So I think it's what you offer them.
So Greg, you've been,
I think a big part of curiosity is contagious as well. I think we set an example for them by being curious ourselves, exploring things with them in class and talk about the things that fascinate us. And I think they learn not just the content from us, but they learn the learning skill of being curious and pursuing creative ideas.
That's so important. It's a lot about the questions you ask. If you come to the end of a class period and you're like, I wonder about this, let's all go see what we can find on this for the next class. Even if you already know, even if I already know what the answer is, or what, that's a great question that a student had. Let's, as a community of learners, let's all go do a little research. Let's go find out the information. And then when we come back, the first 5 minutes, our next class, you tell me what you found. And I'm gonna look it up too, even though maybe I do already know it. But we are a community of learners, and you set that expectation of this in this class. We're all in it together, and we're going to explore, and we're going to find out. It really is finding those moments to say, I wonder if, or what about this, or could it be like this? What if we did this? And go.
Yeah.
And you can actually, in any kind of teaching setting, you can end the session with an unresolved question. It can drive towards curiosity. And either they may bring that up, or you may actually suggest it to the class. It can happen both ways. And you're right, Aaron. It's the idea that, like, that's a really good question. And so I may not necessarily.
We're out of time. All right.
Yeah. So let's come back next time, and let's talk about and see if we can all see if there is a plausible answer to this.
I almost think it's easier to do something like that in remote learning than it is face-to-face, because we're limited by time. We feel like I come to face-to-face, well, I need all 50 minutes to do whatever I have to do next. But in a remote learning setting, I give them my 5 to 10 minutes of whatever, and then maybe we do a whole class Zoom or small group Zoom, and there's a question that comes up, and I said, I'm going to create a forum that you go find something and post it here, and then we're all going to look at what everybody finds. And so if I have a class of 25, all of a sudden within 2 days, I have 25 links to a different article or resources that then everybody else looks like. I really think that curiosity can almost be enhanced in a remote learning, because we're not limited by the time of face-to-face meetings.
Yeah.
Good.
And that's so important. That's your soul has to be well in order to be curious too. Like if you get too tired, because it seems to me curiosity hits us in the shower or on a walk with the dog. Like if I ever have to have a deep thought, I just take the dog for a walk, and it's usually along a certain part of the park where you're just kind of, your mind just wanders, where it's like, oh, that's how I can connect these things, or that's what's going on. And that's probably something that each of us in our personal wellness, as we think about just who we are, I think I need more space in my life a lot of time, because if you get busy, you don't have time to be curious. You just have time to be busy. And so, yeah. And so let's just move to the last one here. And we talked on this a little bit, but this is maybe a little bit more practical, moving towards more practical. And next time we'll get very practical. And we touched on this a little bit, but the timing of everything is really important. That's what one of our colleagues had mentioned this, that as she was thinking about doing the last couple of weeks of, going remote, that it's just a completely different way of thinking. That a lot of times we have, what am I going to do on Monday? What am I doing Wednesday? And she noted that, well, actually it's more kind of weekly. Like I need to be thinking not only daily, but I need to be thinking of chunks of like weeks and units and those sorts of things. And I think that could work too in a face-to-face, right? So Sam, we'd mentioned this a little bit previously, but you think, like when you do your classes, you think more in terms of like units rather than like weeks or something. What's sort of behind the philosophy of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, so this week I got an email from a faculty member, and they're anxious about setting up. We have a new learning management system. They're anxious about setting up their class, and so I can hear in just the tone of an email, without even talking to the individual, that they already have a preconceived way in which they're going to structure their class and the setup of their class. They just need to figure out in Populi what buttons to click and what link to insert and that sort of stuff, so they can keep doing the same thing that they've always been doing in our previous learning management system. But yeah, instead of thinking about, okay, so we go back to the beginning, what are our outcomes? So what kind of assessment, what kind of activities we're going to bring into this course? Then I need to think about, the timing of that. So we talk about scope and we talk about sequence in educational theory. And so the sequencing of that is very key to the types of activities and outcomes that we have for our class and the way that we're assessing those. And so in some cases, it may be better because online is predominantly asynchronous to move into a unit format, which is not limited by specific days or number of days. And so, for example, I have a class that has 10 days. I set 10 days as that, as for each unit. Now, it lessens the number of units. Instead of having 15 weeks across the semester, I may end up with only maybe 11 or 12 units across the whole of the semester. But I'm discovering that with asynchronous learning, that students need more time to want to get the information, deal with the content, reflect on that, discuss with others, and produce. And we've already mentioned that. So a unit structure may work a little bit more effectively along the lines of just a specific week, 7 days. We do a lot of ministry training, for example, and so we have senior pastors who are in our MDiv program or doctoral programs, and it's impossible for them to turn in an assignment on Sunday night. Are you kidding me? They just went through a whole day of ministry, and you're expecting them to turn in something on a Sunday night. No, so we give them a little bit more freedom within their schedule based on a unit structure. So I've just found that that the cool thing about online learning, a little bit different than face-to-face, is you have a lot more flexibility in designing your course around topics or units, not just on a week-by-week kind of basis.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm going to share my screen here. This I found out that according to like best practices in online learning, that you think not necessarily going from a Monday through Friday type thing, but the week actually starts on Tuesday and it ends that next Monday, which sort of, it doesn't seem like that would really make sense. But I've found when I started doing this, the students have thanked me a lot because, okay, now I can sort of use that weekend to catch up. And so what I do is I have like on Tuesdays, that's where the week starts. It starts on the Tuesday, and whatever like content there is, we start this, we can do the connection activities. So they have like Tuesday to Thursday to make their initial response. And then Friday to that next Monday is that turns into sort of the more peer evaluation stuff. And so actually able to have them so once it kind of gets into that sync of this that rhythm, it has really helped quite a bit in being able to help them use that weekend, not like I've got to do all my work on the weekend and turn it in on Sunday or whatever, but then you have that next kind of a buffer day of a Monday. And also as a teacher, that's helped me quite a bit because that means I've got Monday now. I kind of know where everything is, but that gives me that whole day of Monday to kind of gather everything, make sure everything's in the right place. And I don't have to worry about doing that on like a Sunday night or something.
I was going to say before, sorry. As a student, what I found was really helpful was as my courses were outlined in these modules, but like they would help me organize within that module. Week one, they would put a note in. I want you to watch the intro video. I want you to read these 3 things. I don't really want you to do much else. I want you just to kind of sit in that. And then week 2, there's a whole lot of dialogue. And week 3, we kind of work on some kind of summative assessment, whether that's a paper or just meeting in groups or whatever we do. But by that 3rd week, we've engaged for 2 weeks. We've talked to our peers. But the nice thing is, it's like the talking about the flexibility. It's like your summative is due no later than just this date. Like I can turn it in anytime, but I have until this date. So it's not. I have a firm, but it's not like you only have this time to do it. I can then begin to organize my own week around those drop dead dates, so to speak. But the way the modules are set out, where someone says, you've just finished this summative big project and we're moving to the next module. So that week one of the module is always this breathing week. Relax, just read something. There's nothing due. I don't have to turn in anything for a week. And that feels so good when you've come off of working, nights and weekends to try to get something done. So being flexible in how we approach when things are due and how we even help students, like that schedule you just showed kind of sparked in me how much I really appreciate when they lay out week one, just do this, week two, do this. And I know that if week one, like I have so much work, like if I'm doing a big project here, I can probably put off some of that week one work to week two and it's not going to harm too much. Like I'm an adult, like I can start to gauge when things can be messed around with. And it just gives me a little bit of freedom. It gives me the flexibility as a student not to feel overwhelmed and to still engage in content with my peers and all of that. So flexibility, helping them by giving our students some form of way to schedule their own learning. Because if they're 100% online, it really helps to know this is what I would, if I were you, I'd read this week. If I were you, I'd talk to my peers week two. And by week three, I'd be working on that assessment that I'm going to ask you to do. I think that helps.
Because one of the big things that I heard from students, like when I asked them as we were getting into the online stuff, it's like, how can I help you? What are you most nervous about? What are you scared about? All that kind of stuff. And almost all of them said, I don't know what's expected. I don't know when things are due. I don't know what's going to be due. And so kind of what I do is I just make this chart. Like, here's the stuff we're doing. We're not doing everything in the world. Like, there's a lecture and there's a short quiz to take, there's an activity, these are the two basic activities, and then we're going to do a voice thread. And so if they can see that graphically, like, oh, okay, that's just a couple things to do. All right. I can manage that. But if they're not really able to even find it, like it's obscure list somewhere, or it's in a calendar and it's, but I found that students said that they really appreciate just simplicity, like just make it easy. I can look at it, give me a checklist, and then able to move on.
And that's the key. I mean, what you're bringing up is that whether you're doing weeks, topics, or units, it doesn't matter as long as there's consistency there and consistency in communication with the student, so that they know exactly what's happening, because they may have one online class that uses a strict week model. They may have another class that uses topics. Maybe that topic is carried over 2 weeks. And so they need to be informed of that. Or they have a unit progression, built on a 10 or a 12-day kind of unit progression. But the key is informing your students up front, letting them know exactly what the expectations are for each one of those. And especially in online, we may mention this a little bit later when we're talking about videos, is that if they can see the instructor's face, if you're doing a video overview of those week's topics or units, is vitally important. If you're sharing your desktop with them, your screen with them, so see in the syllabus how it's laid out or whatever. The more information, the better in those upfront, communicates to your students.
If our goal is to see students be successful, we can never assume they own a skill set like they're extremely organized. We need to help them, right? So if the goal is about student success, then we need to help in any way we can, give tools within the course itself. Not, there's always boundaries to accountability and all of that. But it's not wrong of us to offer that kind of organizational help, because not everybody owns those skills, and it does keep them from being successful even when they can handle the content. So I just kind of look at it from that perspective. It's about student success too.
Yeah.
So I have a question for the group about the length of the unit. So Kent, you talked in terms of a week, Sam, 10 days, and Jen, you talked about a 3-week cycle. Do you feel like it's more important to establish a regular rhythm in your class, whether it's a week, 10 days, or 3 weeks? Or is it more important to take an accordion approach where the subject that you're addressing may stretch a unit out longer? Do you think it's better for the students to be in a rhythm, or better to adjust based on our topic?
I'll tackle this one. It depends. How's that for an answer? You're starting with your course outcomes, some courses fit better with different parameters of time. And so one of the classes I teach, my modules are like 5 weeks. Like there's huge chunks where I design online to be, there's just a bunch of stuff in a big sense of time. Another class, the class that Jen and I co-teach, it's more like a potpourri of stuff. We're on this topic for 2 days. We're on this one for one. We're on this topic for a day and a half, and then another day and a half for this one. And so a module, or even a week by week time frame doesn't even make sense for that. So the simple answer, which is not simple to your question, Greg, is it depends on your course. It depends on the outcomes you have and what you need and want students to do. And you have flexibility in that. I would say that it's beneficial to students to have a pattern, to have a rhythm. So if you look at your course content and outcomes, you're like, you know what, we can do 5 3-week modules, and then the rhythm of those modules is the same. That's awesome. That's really helpful to students. Your content might not allow for that. And so in that sense, maybe it's a week, or maybe it's 10 days, or maybe like the class Jen and I have, it's even broken down from that. The nice thing about Populi is that it allows you to create lessons that can be varying lengths of time. So if you do want to do the accordion approach, you could have this lesson is for this week, but then this lesson is for the next 15 days. And then we're going to do a lesson that's kind of a standalone, and it's just, Monday to Wednesday. And then you're going to have the rest of the week off to give that break that you need. And then we're going to start over there. I don't think that's necessarily ideal, because students have more things to keep track of. But if your course content lends itself to that, go that direction.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful.
I would say too that the consistency in communicating with your students, that's going to be key. For example, you may have the same student in 2 of your courses, but each course is structured differently. And they may even ask you, well, why are you using 10-day unit structure over here, and then you've got a week model over here? As long as you're consistent with that, and you can explain, well, based on the outcomes for this kind of course, the kind of assessment that we're looking for, it's just structured differently, and you need to get used to that. Even thinking about the students, there's generational differences. If we're teaching graduate students, some of those may be Gen Xers, maybe even busters, maybe even boomers, who knows? And then you got Gen Z mixed in there. And it's like, who's going to adapt where? So some generational theory certainly applies in here, as well as students' abilities to engage. So you need some sort of consistency there, but allowing for the flexibility is kind of a key as well, like Jen was talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think communication is just the absolute most important piece of it. I have students that have 2 classes with me back to back. Each class is ordered differently. One is far more a week by week topic, and the other one is modules up to 3 weeks long. But I make it super explicit. This module, it'll say 2 weeks at the top in the heading, so that they know this is a 2-week module. I want to make sure that they see things. I communicate that this is going to be a longer module, this is going to be a shorter one, and we put it in print and we talk. So it's just communication in order to help our students be successful. And I do think it is all about the content, what your content needs, and what your students need to engage in that content.
Just like in a face-to-face class, and maybe this is more for the P12 world, but you have procedures. When you come in room, you put your backpack in your cubby, you take your coat off, and you put it over here. You go sit at the desk and you start doing the work that's on the board. And then when everybody's here, when the bell rings or whatever, we're going to start. There's those rhythms and patterns that need to exist in remote learning, so that students know where to find things. They know how to turn them in. They know first, like Sam, or Jen, in your 3-week, the first week is this, the second week is this. As much as you can create those policies, those routines, those procedures, just like you would in a face-to-face class, turn your papers in the bin by the door, however this, try to create those patterns of consistency in remote learning too, because it will help your students be successful, especially the ones that aren't organized. The ones that are organized, they'll figure it out for themselves. It's the students that aren't organized that need that structure and guidance to be successful in your class. So Greg, like you. No.
So do you feel the flexibility in an online setting to say, the class is really struggling, we're going to extend this unit another week?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what Jen was talking about, communicating to your students. You're like, they're just not getting this. They're struggling. Or maybe, maybe half the class, their internet went down or whatever. You got to be flexible with it and say, we're going to extend this over a little bit more time, or I'm going to allow a little bit more time for you to reflect more. Even if you received an assignment, I've had to do that with classes where they turn an assignment in, and by and large for the whole class, it was just garbage. And it's like, okay, either I didn't communicate effectively, I didn't have the appropriate activities or engagements. And so we'll take a whiff on that. We're going to revisit this and we're going to restructure it in a different sort of way. Don't have flexibility. But again, being upfront with your communication and letting them know that that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And then, the art of teaching is to have we keep coming back to outcomes, but they're so important in a moment like that because there's time that is being spent to reteach something that you didn't plan for. So something has to give, which is fine. It's really not a problem, but based on your outcomes, you prioritize. When I look what's coming next, okay, I can shrink this. We don't need to read this source. We don't need to watch this. Students don't need to do this because it's more important that they get this information and get it well so that they can do something with it later on, again, based on the outcomes. And so being able to have that big picture again and know I can spend a little time here, but I have to steal it from over here, and then being able to cut what is non-essential, I guess. And that's all based on your course outcomes and the big picture of what your course is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it wreaks havoc for that faculty member that has it specifically laid out, and then their exam, their midterm exam, has all the questions related to the content that they've laid out, and it's like, goodness gracious, if you're not in the habit or the business of revamping your exams, every one of them based on language, then I think by and large you might have missed something in the way in which you're engaging students. I mean, they stone me for that, but
that's true.
Wow. Well, this is good. I think we've covered a lot of area, and I think we've a lot of really good ideas. And next time we can talk about maybe some more specifics. We had sort of targeted this idea of, video and podcast, but I think we could definitely expand that, because one of the things I still need help with personally are things like forums, how to do really engaging forums that make everybody want to be involved with this, because it's probably not a good idea to say, what did you think of the reading? That's probably not a good prompt.
I liked it.
Good. I don't know. And so there are probably better prompts and worse prompts, and even just the practical stuff in a classroom, so we'll look at like how to, maybe some ideas about video podcasting, and then I think also forums, things like that. And then maybe if we could all bring, Jen had mentioned a tool that she uses, Padlet. Is that right? Yeah. And so maybe we could do like a pick of the week type thing where we could bring our favorite show and tell, like this is a killer app, and it's really helped a lot, or it's something I want to try. But cool. Well, thank you guys for participating, and we will chop this up and put it up on our page, and we will get a lot of money from YouTube because there will be advertisers wanting to get in on our brilliance. And so.
Excellent, for sure.
And we'll have to plan a trip to Hawaii. Too bad we don't have a class on that. We could,
That would be real relevant assessment of this course.
And we market it. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys, and go enjoy the rain.
Are we scheduled are we going to talk about our next time we're getting together?
Yeah, I don't think we have anything planned yet.
Okay.
Would beginning of next week, was that? Like,
Beginning works for me. The end of my week next week is brutal.
Yeah, Monday, Tuesday works for me. I wonder if, similar to Greg, if you could just take like your session 4 and maybe send us a new email. But if we
Sure.
break out where like we're going to talk about creating videos, we're going to talk about VoiceThread, we're going to talk about Padlet or other ways to maybe submit learning, like to demonstrate learning. We'll talk about forums specifically. So we have 4 or 5. And maybe like Kent, you were saying like the last one is a miscellaneous, bring your favorite, and maybe that's where Padlet would fall in or something. But if we can organize, podcast too, like if we can organize our thoughts a little bit in each of those 4 areas, because as you saw today, brevity is not a strength of ours.
it doesn't have to be. There's, so
That's why he edits us. He just chops us off when we talk too long, Aaron.
Right.
That's why he edits.
You might need to break even that one into like, here's 7 minutes of how to make a video. Here's 7 minutes about VoiceThread. Here's 7 minutes about that. So
or links to those things.
Sure.
Yeah, because Sam and I found it. Who's the guy, Justin Brown or something, on YouTube? This guy does. Yeah, this guy does business. Yeah. He helps businesses do it, but man, I've learned a ton from him. And just directing people to those resources. Like he's making this content for entrepreneurs, but man, it's really good technical advice, and let's use that. Yeah.
It is free.
Yeah.
A lot of it's free. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very cool.
Free's good. It's our budget.
So Monday or Tuesday?
Either works for me.
Either works for me. FDC meets every Monday at 10. That's the only meeting I have on Monday. So anytime after that on Monday or Tuesday is wide open.
Tuesday's best for me, but I can be flexible on Monday.
Yeah, Tuesday. Let's just do Tuesday then, since you already have something like 9:30 again. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Sweet. Now, do you guys all have Skype access?
I think so.
I'd have to go back. I'm sure I do. Yeah.
Okay.
I have Skype. I have Teams. I have Zoom.
Yeah, I got Teams and Zoom. Skype is so old. I just haven't used it for such a long time.
Big blue. We've got them all, baby.
Because there's actually another tool I'm trying out, and it uses Skype, which actually Skype has a lot better video quality. And so I'll just kind of put feelers out to see what you guys think about that. But from your perspective, it would basically be the same, but it's another tool that I'm trying out to see if it would be a better webcasting type thing. But I'll send you one of the 2 links. So yeah.
Sure.
Sweet. Okay. So Tuesday, 9:30.
Tuesday works great for me.
Sweet.
Sounds good.
So then, Greg, were you going to work on combining those questions, or do you want me to?
I've got my homework assignment. I got it down.
Of doing the questions, or?
Yeah, I'll send them out to everybody.
Okay, perfect.
I'll do it today.
Sweet. All right. Well, thanks, guys. This has been fun. I love this. This is very cool.
That's good.
Hanging out with cool people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I enjoy learning from you all. It's definitely it's good for me in many ways.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Thanks for letting me play with all of you so much.
Well, now we're the cool table at lunch because Jen is here.
Yeah,
so,
thanks for
Man. All right. Well, I will see you guys Tuesday then.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
have a good weekend.